I remember thinking how everyone sounded like a herd of camels. People were rushing by in such great numbers that it was quite challenging to keep up with my mother. If my older brother, Brett, hadn't been pulling me along by the wrist, I think I likely would have gotten lost in the crowd. My mother, Brett, and I were at the mall doing some Christmas shopping about a week before the holiday. I've always really hated crowds and hated Christmas shopping. The only good part about the trip to the stores and making my way through a sea of strangers with my family was stopping at the food court. Looking at the toys and getting into the spirit would have been fun, but the mall was just way too crowded this time of year to enjoy anything without some kind of hassle. To make matters worse, my older brother was always really embarrassing. I mean, he was really misbehaved and made it difficult for my mother to go anywhere. Brett was the type of child to throw a tantrum in the middle of a crowded store if he didn't get his way, even at the age of 10. Fortunately, my mom was a really good shopper, and we really didn't spend more time at the mall than what was necessary. It wasn't much long after we finished our fast food lunches in the overcrowded food court that the three of us headed out of the mall, Mother holding several bags in her hands and Brett still complaining over something he didn't get. Mom likely got it for him anyway, but he was way too impatient to wait for Christmas. Halfway to the car, Brett stopped walking through the snow-covered, vehicle-filled parking lot, refusing to take another step. Instead, Brett began to make a scene in the middle of the lot, forcing my mother to drop the bags of Christmas gifts, walk over to my brother, and forcibly drag him to our van. Times like this, I felt like burying my head in the snow and pretending I didn't know the people I was with. After getting Brett into the van, my mother relieved me of guard duty over the gifts and picked them up. Although I was really curious, I didn't even take a peek. The way home really wasn't any better. Mom and brother arguing back and forth the whole way, while the ridiculous holiday traffic only made the torture last even longer. Mom tried to explain the point of Christmas to Brett, but her words seemed to fall upon deaf ears. "Santa watches everything you do, honey," she told him. But I don't think Brett even believed in Santa Claus anymore. Being only 6 at the time, I still did, and I could not understand how my brother could risk all his holiday joy via not getting anything from Santa because he didn't want to listen to Mom. Mom brought most of the bags upstairs when we returned home, leaving only one large bag on the living room couch. Although the tree was up and the house decorated inside and out, Mom likely picked up some last-minute items that she felt she had to have. Inside that bag was tinsel for our tree, a wreath for the front door, and stockings with the names of each member of our family on them, right down to the dog and cat. Before Mom was able to come back downstairs, Brett had the bag of tinsel torn wide open and had begun to decorate the kitchen with it. After a pointless scolding from my mother and some cleaning, Mom prepared dinner for when Dad came home. We wouldn't hang the stockings until after dinner, something we did as a family each year. That night, after Dad came home and we had all eaten, we began to hang our stockings above the fireplace while Dad told me and my brother a little story. Mom had informed Dad of Brett's behavior earlier that day, and Dad had something to say about it. My father began the story of Santa Claus, traveling around the world, delivering presents to good children, having the ability to see if you're sleeping, and all the rest that we've heard hundreds of times growing up. "Yeah, Dad, I know. Santa will bring me coal," Brett finished for my father. "Okay, so you know the story of Santa, but have you heard of Krampus?" My father inquired as he hung the last stocking on the mantel. "No offense, Dad, but who the heck is Krampus?" My brother replied snidely. Well, son, think of Krampus as an anti-Santa Claus. Krampus is a demonic-looking creature with two large horns protruding from each side of his head. While Santa is making his rounds to all the good boys and girls, Krampus does the same for all the little deviants. Santa Claus brings a sack full of toys that he will empty on all boys and girls. Krampus carries an empty, dirty sack that he fills up with all the bad little children, and then he takes them away back to his mountain lair. Both Santa and his doppelganger will leave gifts in the stockings of your fireplace, my father said, lifting a finger in the direction of the newly hung stockings. However, Krampus does not leave you toys and candy. He brings your family a part of your remains and leaves it for them in your stocking, hung with care. So remember, boys, do what your mother tells you, or Santa may put you on his naughty list, and Krampus handles those children. My father finished, tending to put a slight amount of fear into my brother and I. Although I think my dad intended to intimidate Brett into behaving, it was my 6-year-old self who wound up unsettled. Brett seemed to just make fun of Dad's story, telling Dad that it sounded fake and teasing me relentlessly, almost picking up on my fear. After sipping some hot cocoa by the newly lit fireplace and having some snacks at Brett's demand, my parents ushered us off to bed, reminding us to finish our cookies before we departed. Brett stole the rest of mine. After climbing into my bed and my mother tucking me in, my parents wrestled and argued Brett into his on either side of our large blue bedroom and told us both good night. Turning off the light and leaving the door open a crack, my parents left us alone and retired to the master bedroom down the hall. I watched the snow fall outside my bedroom window as Brett whispered about the evil deeds of Krampus, telling me that I had to be good or he'd tell him where to find me. Telling him to stop and telling him that he's the one that should be nervous didn't seem to help much. Eventually, Brett would fall asleep, leaving me petrified in the dimly lit room, watching the snow fall silently outside my bedroom window. Despite my brother's best efforts, I still dreamt of a pleasant Christmas morning with my parents, towers of presents beside the tree that sparkled in the dim morning, lights twinkling through the night and into the following day. Unfortunately, the next day and the day after that did not boast the coming of Christmas. We still had a few more days until then. After what seemed like a lifetime, however, the night of my mother's yearly Christmas Eve party was upon our home. I remember the house, just like every year, had the smells of pie and turkey lingering about the air. Also, just like every year, my brother and I were forced to dress up in some kind of stupid sweater that my parents dressed us as if they were going out on a date. Let me reread that one. Excuse me. Also, just like every year, my brother and I were forced to dress up in some kind of stupid sweater while my parents dressed as if they were going out on a date. My folks never did entertain much. The only time they did was on Christmas Eve, making the night very important to both my parents, especially my mother. While my parents were entertaining the guests downstairs, my brother and I were upstairs, silently entering my parents' bedroom. While they were busy talking and filling drinks for various people that filled the living room, dining room, and kitchen of our home, Brett was forcing me to stand and watch as he dug through a pile of wrapped boxes in my parents' closet. "No way, this is mine. Hey, you want to know what you got?" Brett asked me as he carefully unwrapped one side of one of the presents, presenting him with what was inside. I didn't really want him to tell me, but he did anyway. I replied, but Brett cut in with, "It's that stupid train set thing you wanted." Brett carefully wrapped the end back up and placed tape over the old tape that had been cut with the scissors that he had brought with him. Usually, Brett ruined my parents' Christmas. Now, he had to go and ruin mine. 20 or so minutes went by with my older brother discovering each and every present we would receive the next day and calling it out by name as he did. I really wished we would have gotten caught. I would have just told him no or ran and told on him. It would have beat me up for sure. Instead, I watched down that bedroom hall, being brought nearly to tears by my brother's insensitivity, wishing my parents would come up the stairs. I listened to Brett finish up the last of the presents, placing everything back the way it was, and tell me to follow him back downstairs. I didn't enjoy anything that night. I didn't care about the pies, pastries, or roasted meats. I didn't care about the candies, cookies, and company of family and close friends. I wanted my Christmas back. I wanted to be surprised when I opened my gifts. Some of those presents he opened, he told me were from Santa. At 6, this broke my heart. Could my parents really just be buying me presents and putting Santa's name on them? I wished so bad for Santa to be real. I knew if Santa, Krampus might be too. But I didn't care. I didn't care if Krampus came and took bread away in his dirty old sack. In fact, I wished for that too. That thought, however, was quickly replaced by a simple desire for a happy Christmas with my family, even at such a young age. I was able to take comfort in this simple yet trademark concept. The night dwindled down into a dull murmur in the living room, most of the guests having left and remaining members talking about the ride home in preparation to leave. As the last of the guests filed out the door, my mother and father let out a sigh of relief. My mom gave my father the task of putting the two of us to bed while she cleaned up after the party. After placing out a tray of cookies with a glass of milk for Santa, my dad finally got us into bed, bribing my brother and I with candy and promises of extra TV time for Brett the following day. He gently said goodnight and left us in our beds, under our covers, on a silent Christmas Eve. Brett listened up for a long time, trying to wait for Mom and Dad to bring presents from their room and put them under the tree. I'm not sure how late he was able to stay awake. I fell asleep well before him. When I awoke, the room was dark. The light from the hallway was not on, signaling my parents had gone to bed and were likely fast asleep. My mother could be heard snoring at the opposite end of the room, and then I heard it with my waking ears. A thump on the attic. No, that wasn't in the attic. That sounded like it came from the roof, I thought. I'm sure most of you hearing this would simply disprove the possibility before even getting out of bed. But at 6, I only wanted to see if that was the sound of footsteps, if it was truly Santa on the roof. I sat up in my bed and stood to my feet. More thumping could be heard, making its way across the roof. I wanted to beat him there. I had to. I had to find a place to hide nearby so I could watch him as he placed the presents beneath the tree. Quickly and quietly, so as to not wake my older brother, I crept from the room and snuck down the stairs towards the inviting glow of the living room lit by a twinkling tree. I sat in silence behind my father's recliner chair. No more noises from the roof. Maybe it was just some falling snow or other rational explanation. Then, it hit me. When I came down into the living room, I was so excited, I didn't even give it a passing thought. A pile of presents was already boasted beside the tree. The tray of cookies, empty, and the glass of milk, only half full. Had he really done his work that fast? I remember thinking. It had only been mere moments between the noises on the roof and my entry into the living room. And that's when I noticed it. Soot falling from inside the chimney down onto the now extinguished remainder of firewood that resided within. Someone, or something, was coming down the chimney. Maybe Mom and Dad just brought down their presents and ate the cookies, just in case. Santa didn't come. Maybe it's still him, I thought to myself. But when I saw two large, hooved feet hit the base of the fireplace with a thud, I knew they didn't belong to Santa Claus. With one long, almost impossible movement, a large, dark, hairy shape reach out with its body and emerge from my parents' fireplace. The beast was tall and covered with hair from nearly head to toe. Only its long, bony fingers, tipped with long, black claws, the two horns on top of its head sporting a hideous leather-like face, and the flesh above its grotesque hooved feet were bare of fur. It clutched a limp, dirty burlap sack in one hand and a large club in the other. I don't know why. It just slipped out. "Krampus?" I asked, ever so softly, before clasping both of my hands very tightly over my mouth. The creature turned and looked at me with its fiery, beady eyes, smirked a sinister grin, and turned its attention towards the direction of the kitchen and the stairs. I watched in a paralyzing fear as the monster slowly clomped up the stairs, burlap sack dragging on the steps behind it. It wasn't until it was out of sight that I found the courage to stand up. Once I did, it was like a momentum that I could not stop. I immediately ran up the stairs after the creature, right to my parents' room. After bursting through the door, I ran to my father's side of the bed, desperately trying to wake him up. Dad, it's Krampus. He's here for Brett. I wished he would come. Now he's here. I didn't mean it. I'm sorry. Dad, wake up, please." It was no use. I tried my mother as well. They just kept snoring. I don't know why, but they wouldn't rouse even a little, not even with me shaking them violently. That was Brett. I ran back down the hall and into my bedroom to try and help my brother. I was stopped in my tracks by a horrifying sight. The creature had Brett by his left arm, lifting him high into the air, bringing him head level with it, Brett dangling from the creature's clawed hand. Facing my direction, Brett looked at me, pleading for help and shrieking in terror as the thing's tongue slid from its mouth with an impossible length and began to writhe about Brett's face, frequently halting his pleas for help as it occasionally would slip over the oral cavity. I wanted to help him, but my legs refused to obey my brain. I was only 6. I was terrified beyond belief. Krampus then dropped my brother to the floor with a thud. As Brett scrambled to make his way towards me, the monster swung its large wooden club at Brett, knocking him back to the floor. I watched in shaking fear as the creature bludgeoned my brother repeatedly, Brett screaming and crying loudly between each strike. The sounds of his bones could be heard snapping from across the room, signaled by the loud popping noises. After the monster had beaten my brother into nothing more than a bloody, whimpering mess on the floor, he picked up what was left of him and placed him into his large burlap sack. I stood like a statue as the creature walked right by me, my brother in a sack being dragged behind it, the demon smiling at me all the way. It wasn't until the monster had turned the corner of my doorway, leaving a blood trail from my brother behind it, that I let out the most powerful scream that I could muster. After that, I hit the floor in blackness. I'd finally passed from shock. The next morning, my parents awoke me on my bedroom floor. They were in a panic over the blood trail and over my missing brother. I offered them an explanation, but at first, they chalked it up to an elaborate prank orchestrated by my deviant older brother. They didn't even believe me when they saw the large, sooty, hooved prints on the living room floor, originating from the fireplace. The large, bloody club on the mantel above Brett's stocking, however, did give them pause. I stood by my mother as my father noticed something dripping from Brett's stocking. saturating the bottom of the fabric and creating a crimson puddle beneath. I think they finally believed that there may be some truth to my story when my father pulled my brother's peeled, dripping skin from his saturated stocking. Years passed before I ever opened up any presents from that Christmas. However, just recently, I found myself digging through my parents' attic and stumbling on some old pictures of me and my brother. Inside the large cardboard box in which it was contained were a couple of wrapped Christmas presents, hidden beneath the random memorabilia. The one wrapped in snowflake wrapping paper caught my attention. It said my name, and then, from Santa. I couldn't resist. I knew it had to be one of those presents that Brett ruined for me, but just holding it in my hands brought back happy memories of my brother, despite the brat that he was at that age. I opened up the paper with care and saw the train set that I had asked for. I assumed that this was the same gift that my brother had ruined for me years before, until I read the note on the card inside. It read my name at the top, with a short letter underneath.
I'm sorry this Christmas turned out so poorly for you. Here's a gift that I hope will make it a little better. I'm sorry your brother nearly ruined your holiday cheer. I too can empathize. I know how evil a brother can be. Yours truly, Santa.